Good morning, everybody. Great to be part of the summit. Great to share the stage with Sandy. I'm a huge fan of the work she and her colleagues are doing. Look, I know this event is all about the future of your hospitals, medical practices, labs, but indulge me for just a second as I get a little nostalgic about the past. Bruce mentioned I'm the co-founder of Fast Company magazine. I'm feeling old. We actually just celebrated the 20th anniversary of the launch of the magazine. We had a fantastic reunion here in Boston not too long ago with the original game. So I've been thinking a lot about the old days. And it occurred to me at the very beginning of the magazine, right after the first issue came out, we convened kind of a summit like this of our own around the theme, how do you overthrow a successful company? Now, it wasn't a gathering of startup founders and internet hotshots eager to take on the establishment, although that was kind of our target audience. It was a gathering of strategists and marketers and technologists from organizations that had been around for decades, organizations that were icons in their field, who sensed that there were massive shifts on the horizon, and who were determined to reckon with those shifts and embrace a new generation of business models, a new era of technology and communication, a new level of customer sophistication and expectations. That was 1994. And it strikes me that in some sense, this summit is wrestling with that very same question. And that's because the work of making deep-seated, meaningful change, building on all your past success, even as you build out a whole new point of view about the future, really has become the defining work of our time. That's what all of you have signed up to do. That's what it means to be an innovator today. And that's what I want to talk about this morning. To offer a set of ideas and a collection of case studies drawn from game-changing organizations in lots of different fields about what it means to do something new and build something great, about how to unleash positive, long-lasting change in tough, fast-moving times. Specifically, I want to talk to you about growth and the power of ideas, how you compete, customers, patience, and the power of people, how you connect, change, and a real commitment to creativity, how you reframe your approach to whatever field you're in. Basically, I want to take the work all of you are doing as innovators to make your organizations even more successful and put it in the context of the big forces that I think are reshaping the logic of innovation and success at every organization. So let's start with how you compete. And this to me is the backdrop to everything you're going to be talking about for the next couple of days. Bruce mentioned the title of my next book. We are really living in a world today where average is not an option. You can't do big things anymore if you're content with doing things a little bit better than everybody else or a little bit differently from how you've done them in the past. In an era of hyper-competition and nonstop disruption, the only way to stand out from the crowd, the only way to really make a difference is to stand for something special. Originality really has become the acid test of your innovation strategy. The term I like to use is strategy as advocacy. Winning organizations today don't just offer competitive products and services. They stand for important ideas. Ideas that are meant to shape the landscape of their field. Ideas that are meant to reshape the sense of what's possible for your colleagues, for your customers, for your partners. You know, for so long, we all kind of grew up in a world where the strong took from the weak. If you had the best established brand, the biggest labs, the deepest pockets, you succeeded basically by virtue of your muscle. That world is gone. The new logic of success in every field is that the smart take from the strong. The most successful organizations don't just try to outcompete or outperform their rivals. They aspire to redefine the terms of competition in their field by embracing one-of-a-kind ideas in a world filled with Me Too copycat rivals. Ask yourselves, and this is to me the essence of innovation, what do we see? New ways to deploy technology, new ways to engage our patients, new ways to organize our people to swap ideas and solve problems that other organizations in this field haven't yet seen. That's what leaders do. They see things, that's what innovators do. They see things that other organizations haven't yet seen and get to the future first. What do you see that other people in this field haven't yet seen? That's the question that's going to drive your future innovation success. But it's a complicated question to answer, especially in organizations that are doing reasonably well, which is why, and Sandy suggested it, which is why the work of change really is so hard and so messy. One last little fast company history lesson, then I'll get on with it. So it turns out, I was chuckling about this last night when I was thinking, in the very first issue of the magazine, one of the very first articles we published in the issue was a great article by a guy named E.F. Borish. He was a technology executive at a company called the Milwaukee Gear Company, a really great manufacturing company in Wisconsin, founded by his father. He was a real change agent, a real provocateur. And the title of the article was simply, 50 Reasons Why We Can't Change. And the article was nothing more than a numbered list of all the objections he had heard over the years to his efforts to innovate at the company. And they really were kind of hilarious. We've already done this before. It didn't work. Why should we try it again? We've never done this before. About the same idea. We've never done this before. Why should we be the first ones out of the gate? Our competitors are already doing this. We would just be copycats. None of our competitors has ever tried this. Do we really want to go that far on a limb? We're too big. This idea would never work here. We're too small. I don't think we have the capacity to make this idea. And on and what. Now, here's the punchline. We published that article in 1994. It was actually just a reprint of his article that had been originally published in the scientific journal in 1959, 55 years ago. Now, and so obviously the message to our readers then, the message to all of you today is, the more things change, the more the objections to change remain the same, which is why in some sense, your first job as an innovator, and I think Sandy ended her remarks on this note, your first job as an innovator is to persuade your colleagues that oftentimes playing it safe is the riskiest strategy of them all. And so the simple message to you, the real gut check for all of you is that innovation today is not about being the best at what lots of other people already do. It's about being the only one who does what you do. What do you promise that only you can promise? What do you deliver that nobody else can deliver? What are you the most of in your field? And how do you become even more of that? Now, let me show you what this looks like in the real world. I'm about to lose all of my credit, or what little credibility I had, I'm about to lose it all. But let me show you what this looks like in the real world. I'm going to tell you a story, a case study, that it's quirky, a little bit weird, I grant you. Got very little to do with the incredibly important work all of you do every day. But I think by the end, you'll understand its relevance in the lesson. So one of my really fun experiences last year in the speechifying stuff is that I got to do a national tour with a big technology company. It wasn't IBM, so it'll remain nameless. I want to pay tribute to our sponsors. And we'd go city to city, and we'd do business during the day, and I'd give my talk and so on and so forth. And then at night, weirdly enough, we'd all go to see a Cirque du Soleil show. This company was a strategic marketing partner with Cirque du Soleil, and so we'd pick the date in Boston or Chicago or Denver when a different Cirque du Soleil show happened to be in town. So after doing this for a year, I have now seen more Cirque du Soleil shows than anybody on the planet, which is a nice way to go through life. I'm happy to do that kind of deal. But I'm a student of business and innovation and strategy. So after seeing a few of these shows, I said, I should really look at this company not just as a fun night out, but as a as a company. And I went up to Montreal, sat with the business team and the founders and so on. And what I really concluded after all that was that there may not be a more interesting and colorful, certainly, example of an innovator who is in a field and has just fundamentally rethought every element of what it might be to be an organization in that field. So step back for a second. I mean, this is really a creative and commercial juggernaut of the first order. Started about 25 years today by Guy Laliberté and his friends up in Montreal. This year, they'll do over $1 billion in revenue. They got 5,000 full-time performers. They'll sell more than 10 million tickets in 25 countries around the world. They now do more business every year. They sell more tickets than every Broadway show put together. They did in their first 20 years what it took Ringling Brothers, kind of the IBM of the circus, if you will, what it took Ringling Brothers 100 years to do, and more, maybe more than anything else. They have created in this field, kind of the circus, it's kind of messy and freaky and weird. They've created this global entertainment icon. That's really one of the great brands of the last 25 years. How'd they do it? They did it by, and I think this is, again, relevant, in a fun way, relevant to the work you're doing. They did it by reimagining the experience and rethinking the economics of how to be in that field. So I had never seen a circus show before, and so I went to my first circus show. I'm looking at it. The first question I asked is, where the heck are the animals? I mean, there's a circus, right? What immediately you think about the circus is the lions and the tigers and the great beasts of the jungle kind of deal. The first strategic / innovative decision they made was there will be no live animals ever at a Cirque du Soleil show. Now, part of that was cultural. You know, we feel like as a society we're evolving. We no longer want these majestic beasts performing for our amusement. But part of it was economic and strategic. It turns out, you study the circus business, 40% of the operating budget of a traditional circus is the cost of acquiring, feeding, transporting, healing when they're sick, the live animals in the show. And so with that one decision, they wipe out 40% of the budget of their competition. Second thing you notice is, hey, you know, when you think about a circus, you think about the sword swallower, the lion tamer, the kind of larger-than-life superstars, their versions of George Clooney or Julia Roberts. There's none of that at a circus. I mean, there's no lion, so you don't need a lion tamer. And they've got this great cast, but it's kind of interchangeable. Again, creative economic decisions. The second biggest line item in a circus budget are the huge salaries relative to everybody else you pay for the 5 or 6 or 10 larger-than-life figures in the circus. Cirque du Soleil said, there are no stars at a Cirque show. The show itself is the star. Now, with those two decisions, those two innovative constraints, if you will, they wipe out 60% of the costs of the competition, and they also eliminate the most predictable artistic elements of the competition. Now, they take all those resources, and they free them up, and they use it to invest in and develop the three things that they believe their customers really care about today. The clowns, the acrobats, and the physical staging itself, the grand chapiteau in Cirque speech. And with that fundamental, innovative insight, they've created over the last 20 years something that's not just a little bit better than you might come to expect in the traditional offerings in this field, but something that represents a performance that is genuinely new, exciting, compelling. They're not just the best at what they do in their field of entertainment. They are truly the only ones who do what they do. And that, I would submit to you, is really where strategy begins today. The only sustainable form of innovation leadership is thought leadership. And so as you're here for these next 2 days and you're soaking in all the panels and the keynotes and all this information and the booze and everything, every so often, give yourself permission to set aside the patient categories or treatment segments around which you're building the business, or all the pressures that are bearing down on the business, and ask yourself, what are the ideas that define how we do business and that distinguish us from how everyone else in this field does business? Honestly, it's a little goofy, but ask yourself, what's our version of live animals at the circus? What are the things we keep doing, keep delivering, keep investing in, mainly because We've always been doing, delivering, investing in them. And if we eliminated that stuff, A, maybe people wouldn't notice. B, maybe they would notice and appreciate it, and it would free up all kinds of resources that we're now committing for no good reason. What's your version of the acrobats? Small wrinkles, little touches, modest innovations you could offer that maybe don't cost very much money, but people will sense them and be excited about them and appreciate them. What do you see that other organizations in your field haven't yet seen? Or let me put it a little differently. I love that video. That video is kind of teeing up a lot of my commentary. With all of the problems and headaches and worries in the world, most of us spend most of our time wrestling with that age-old cliche, what keeps you up at night? What are the worries and headaches that nag at you? And Lord knows everybody in healthcare has a lot that keeps them up at night. But I'm convinced when it comes to innovation, the much more powerful question, especially for your colleagues back home, the much more powerful question isn't what keeps you up at night, but what gets you up in the morning? What makes you and your colleagues more excited than ever, more creative than ever, and maybe most importantly, more confident than ever, in a world which on most days still seems more uncertain, more worrisome, more threatening than ever. And I got to tell you, this is a lesson I have learned and relearned over the last 6 or 7 years. I researched Practically Radical right in the teeth of the Great Recession and the meltdown that was affecting everything. And one of the lessons I really came away from that experience with was that, sure, the most successful, the most innovative organizations really do think differently from everybody else. But I got to tell you, and this is going to sound a little bit simplistic, particularly in a sophisticated crowd like this, but I hope you'll bear with me. The most successful, the most innovative organizations genuinely do care more than everybody else about customers, patients, about colleagues, about how the whole organization conducts itself in a world with so many opportunities still to cut corners and compromise on values. You can't build something special, distinctive, compelling in the marketplace unless you first build something special, compelling, distinctive in the workplace. The video, I don't know who it was, but the video, said it well. Innovation today isn't just about science, technology, project management. It really, and I hate the word, we all hate the word, but it really is about culture. A genuine sense of commitment among everybody to share information, swap ideas, identify problems, and bring out the best in everybody they encounter. Now, I recently got a chance to spend time at an organization, again, not a healthcare organization, but very relevant to the innovation agenda you're all working on. And it's really one of the inspiring organizations I've met in a long time. It's USAA, the banking and financial services giant based in San Antonio, Texas. Incredible, incredible company. 10 million members now of USAA, 25,000 people, revenues last year of $20 billion. So an incredible presence in the marketplace. And, talk about being the most of something. They serve just one slice of the marketplace, and they serve it very, very well. They basically do business exclusively with active and retired members of the U.S. military and their families. Now, given events over the last 20 years, that's a big piece of the population, but that's the slice of the population they serve, and they serve it incredibly well. In fact, you look at any measure, and you all do measures of patient satisfaction, you look at any measure of customer satisfaction, customer loyalty in that industry, Gallup, JD, they are just wildly off the charts. They're probably, their customers are probably more passionate about that organization, that brand, than customers of any company I've met. You look at metrics of technology innovation, awards from the researchers and the magazines. This company, which is in many ways a very conservative organization, is just crazed when it comes to rolling out technology innovations before anybody else. They were the first financial services company anywhere to allow you to deposit check by iPhone. So you're at a military base in Afghanistan, someone gives you a paper check. What the heck am I going to do with this? So you take a picture of it with your iPhone, you email it to USAA, and it goes into your account. They were the first financial services company anywhere to allow you to check your balances and move money around by text message. You're on maneuvers somewhere in the field. You can't call up the 1-800 number and talk to a customer service rep, but you still got your phone. You can check your... They were the first financial services company anywhere to allow for peer-to-peer movement of money among your family or among other members of the USAA membership community. And on it goes. I was down there 6 months or so ago, and they, you know, when a military base gets hit by a big storm, and they were looking at drone technology. Rather than having insurance adjusters climbing up ladders and looking at roofs, let's fly drones. Rand Paul wasn't very happy about it, but let's fly drones over houses and take pictures and try to do it that way and make it more safe. Anyway, on it goes. Now, I'm convinced that the reason why this organization is so effective and such an innovator in the marketplace is that they think so carefully and so creatively about what they're building in the workplace. I mean, I really don't think I've met another organization where the symbols, the rituals, the sense of daily life is just an ongoing reminder of the mission they're serving, the cause they're advancing, and why their work matters. And they're just endless little touches. So I've been looking at some of their training programs. So they bring people in, they have 25 people working in their IT department. I know IT innovation is a big deal in healthcare as well. They've got training for new employees. And of course it's about here's the technology, brush up your C++ programming. But really a lot of it is just in deep cultural stuff. So one of the first things you do is you arrive and they put you through what they call a virtual overseas deployment. This is really kind of interesting simulation where you have to put yourselves in the shoes of someone who's in the National Guard or Army Reserve. You're minding your own business in Lynn, Massachusetts, and you get that letter saying you've been called up to active duty, you've got 3 weeks to get your affairs in order, report to Fort Leavenworth, or whatever the case may be. That is a life-changing, game-changing situation. What's my financial condition? What's my life insurance situation? We need a new car. My spouse has never bought a new car before. What are we going to do? All that kind of stuff. And they just kind of rattle your cage and say, put yourself in the position of someone who's going through that. They have this incredible campus in San Antonio, actually largest single office building anywhere in North America other than the Pentagon. They got 15,000 people working in a 2-floor office building, just zigs and zags, this incredible campus, great cafeterias, great food, all that kind of stuff. But on a pretty regular basis during the training, it's lunchtime, you're hungry, you look in the back and they roll in carts with meals ready to eat, MREs, the slop that the soldiers in the field would. And that's the thing, well, we're not going to the salad bar at the wonderful cafeteria this time, we're all going to eat the MREs. Every so often, you're in an auditorium like this, you're doing your training, you look back and there are stacks of 65-pound backpacks in the back. That's a signal that for the next couple of hours, as you go room to room, meeting to meeting, you're going to be carrying one of those 65-pound backpacks, standard issue backpack for the U.S. military. You'll be carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders the same way that your customers carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. The newest thing, and this has to be voluntary because people will be dropping dead, is you can volunteer to sign up for 0 day. I don't know if folks who've been in the military know what I'm talking about. 0 day is the first day of basic training where you're some young kid, you don't know what you've gotten yourself into, you take the bus, you get off, and the drill sergeant is screaming in your face, and they're making you do 50, you haven't done a push-up in 2 years, they're making you do 50 push-ups, run 10 miles, and people do prepare for that and get medical, they really don't want to have heart attacks left and right, but if you want to do it, they will put you on a bus, and you show up at 4:30 in the morning, and you go through what is the single most grueling, demanding, humiliating day in the career of a soldier. And a lot of their training ends at night after dinner with folks reading out loud to one another letters from soldiers in the field home to their families, letters from their families off to the soldiers. Not always about matters of life and death, but about our car broke down. As I said, how do I negotiate with the dealer? They've got a great app for, you walk into a dealer, you're a USAA customer, they know basically don't mess with this person. They've got the app right there, and you'll walk it through. And they call it surround sound. And there's just every opportunity to look to folks who it's so easy to get lost in your technical area, your functional specialty, your particular division of the organization, and not really care very much about what everybody else is doing. But by virtue of that immersion in the sense of common mission and common cause, this really is an organization. I don't want to be too whimsical about it, but this really is an organization where people don't have a lot of time for politics and bureaucracy. And I actually don't think you hear a lot of the same objections that E.F. Borish heard all those years ago. In fact, one of them is sort of evoking an internal version of the innovation ecosystem. They have something called ICE, ICE, Innovation Communities for the Enterprise. And it is this grassroots, peer-to-peer network of new ideas, vetting ideas. And so many of the innovations I mentioned to you early were stuff not that was some top-down genius strategist saying this is where the world is going, stuff that just bubbled up because folks are so committed to the cause, so eager to share, so not protective of their turf or function or technology. And I got to tell you, that, more than some razzle-dazzle app, more than some incredibly disruptive technology, that kind of human energy is what really fuels the journey of innovation and experimentation at the best organizations. So I know you're going to get wowed by all this kind of technical stuff for the next couple of days, but every so often, again, give yourself permission to step back and ask yourselves, as people leading innovation, A, what separates us from everybody else in the marketplace? That's really important. But then B, what holds us together as colleagues in the workplace? What kinds of commitments are we making to one another about how we're going to behave, how we're going to share, how we're going to team up, so that together, oftentimes without central leadership, without some three-ring binder and top-down strategy, we will unleash innovations that are really exciting. And this, to me, is just such an important part. Of course, innovation, success, is all about price, performance, features, pure economic value. But it really is, and someone used the P word on the video, it really is about passion, emotion, identity, sharing your values. You've got to look at your organization every day and say, okay, particularly in healthcare, how do we make everything we do more reliable, more accessible, more affordable? But I think the real opportunity today, the real magic, is when you also step back and ask yourselves as innovators, how do we make everything we do more memorable for the rest of the world to encounter? What is the emotional and psychological contract we're establishing with our customers, our patients, our colleagues, our partners, that separates us from everybody else? You know, one of the nice things about being in Boston, I started Fast Company when a colleague and I left the Harvard Business Review. Now I've kind of the circle of life. I've come back to do some stuff with HBR. I blog for HBR and spend a little bit of time on campus. And maybe my favorite professor at HBR these days is a woman, a remarkable woman by the name of Young Mi Moon. And teaches one of the most popular courses at the school, has written some of the best-selling cases in the history of the school. And her course is all about what she calls the organization of the future. And I was thinking about what I would share with you today. I said I could save everybody $10,000 in executive education. I'll just give you the crib notes from her course. But she has studied really some of the iconic organizations that have emerged over the last 20 or 25 years. And what she says, and what I'll share with you free of charge, is that organizations of the future are built on three key foundations. It strikes me, these really are foundations that could guide all of you as you think about your own innovation agendas. First thing she said is, organizations of the future offer things that are hard to come by. Now this to me is a really important point, because if you think about the world we're in today, even in healthcare, but in so many, just about every field you can name, as tough as it is, as demanding as it is, from the point of view of your customers, your patients, they really are living in a world of exceptional abundance. They have more choices, more options, more sources of information, more opinions and messages than they've ever had in their life. And the question for all of us as innovators is, amidst all this abundance, what do we offer that is scarce? I mean, one of the first lessons you learn in freshman economics is that value accrues to scarcity. And so in a world where most of your other counterparts are reasonably good at what they do, are offering what passes as the conventional wisdom, what are you offering that is scarce? Second thing she says is, organizations of the future embrace at least one big idea. Now, you understand why I like that, but I mean, what she actually likes to say is that they commit themselves to doing something that is unprecedented in their field, something that's never quite been done that way before. I mean, that's the Cirque du Soleil story writ large. In many respects, that's the USAA story writ large. And I know it's easy for me to, show up this morning and say, you need to do something that's never quite been done that way before in your field. But that is the real demand of innovation. And the third thing she says, which maybe sort of connects with me more than anything else, is that what she says is organizations of the future will be intensely human. And I got to tell you, I don't want to suggest I know more than I do. I have done some of my research set in the world of healthcare, give a lot of talks in the world of healthcare. What strikes me about so much of what I encounter is that, understandably, because so much of what everybody does is about professional history and technology and clinical outcomes and solving the problem at hand, we have in a lot of weird ways drummed out the human equation in so much of what we do. And so many of my own personal just encounters with the healthcare system, the rooms I sit in, the cafeterias I eat in, the processes I'm a part of. It's like, okay, the data's here and the treatment's there. Does anybody know I'm a real live human being? And I do think in a world that every day is being so reshaped by technology, what people are genuinely hungry for today is a sense of shared humanity. And so anything you can do as innovators, not just to make your organizations more effective clinically, but to make your organizations more human, is going to be very powerful. So what are you offering that's hard to come by? These are the three questions. What are you offering that's hard to come by? What are you building that hasn't quite been built that way before? And how are you infusing everything you're offering and everything you're building with a real sense of humanity? Make even just a little bit of progress on those three questions, and I think you've really moved the needle on the innovation agenda. Let's face it, most organizations in most fields have a kind of tunnel vision. Everybody is chasing after the same opportunities everybody else is chasing after. Everybody is missing opportunities that are hidden in plain sight. If only you could look at the world a little bit differently. There's a great, one of my academic heroes, a guy named Jerome Bruner. He teaches at NYU, 99 years old or 99 years young, still active. Used to teach at Harvard, used to teach at Oxford. He's now gone on to NYU. He's kind of one of the fathers of cognitive psychology. He thinks a lot about innovation. What he likes to say, and it's a little bumper sticker aphorism, but I think it's, to me, it kind of speaks pretty powerfully. What he likes to say is, innovation is the act of using what you already know to get beyond what you currently think. And I got to tell you, let that sink in for just a second. I got to tell you, I see that challenge, if you will, maybe in healthcare more than any other field. For totally right and understandable reasons, we're so steeped in expertise, track record, past results, past performance, and all this wisdom, all this knowledge is just awesomely important, except when all that expertise gets in the way of innovation. Everybody here and all of your colleagues, because you know so much, you guys can do that E.F. Boris thing to the max. You can always find some reason. There was a study 3 years ago, or we tried that 4 years. You can always find some reason to block, question, challenge the logic of an innovation. And it takes a real, it's sort of the paradox of expertise. The more you know about something, the harder it becomes to open your eyes to new possibilities and new innovations. In this regard, I will tip my hat to that great medical theorist and innovation strategist, George Carlin. So any of you who knew the late, great George Carlin, back in the 70s and 80s, he'd walk out on stage in Las Vegas or in a club in New York, whatever, probably under the heavy influence of hallucinogenic drugs, and he'd look out at the audience and he'd say, I'm experiencing a sense of vujade. And people say, what the heck is vujade? And he would describe vujade, and he did it in much more colorful language than I will, but vujade, he would say, is the opposite of deja vu. Deja vu, and we've all had that, I've never been in this particular auditorium at the World Trade Center. Well, feels like I've been here before. You meet people at a conference, you get hot and heavy in conversation, and you have that weird twinge. Have we met before? You sound so familiar that what you just said, I feel like I heard it before. The unfamiliar seems oddly familiar. Vujade is the opposite of that. Can you look at a profession you've been part of since you got out of business school or medical school or graduate school? Can you look at an organization you've been working in for the last 10 or 15 or 20 years? Can you look at a patient class that you've been treating or intervening with for as long as you can remember, and somehow look at it as if you've never seen it before? And with that fresh set of eyes, they have developed a whole new line of sight into the future in many respects, particularly because this field, this room, is so full of people with deep, deep expertise. The capacity to summon that George Carlin sense of vujade and look at the world fresh really becomes a hugely important challenge. Last story, then hopefully we do some Q&A and discussion. So I'm a little hesitant to talk about healthcare or hospitals too much because all of you know way more than I do. But I will say, and Sandy and Bruce know these folks, I'm sure, but in this last book, I spent a bunch of time out in Seattle at Virginia Mason Medical Center, Gary Kaplan, all that. And to me, and they would never use this language themselves, but to me, what they've done the last 15 years or so really is this vujade mindset come to life. And so Gary Kaplan takes over about 15 years ago, and Virginia Mason's a hospital and healthcare system like downtown Seattle, 340 beds, 400 docs, 5,000 people. Every city's got 3 or 4 hospitals like that. And Gary Kaplan took over as CEO, I think 14 years ago now. And it was not great, sort of breaking even barely. And the clinical outcomes were fine, but the quality outcomes, the quality outcomes were a little sketchy and things weren't quite as crisp and efficient as they could be. And Gary Kaplan and his colleagues really aspired to do something great. And so the first thing they said is, we've got to learn from organizations that are truly the best in the world at all the things we need to get much better at, which means, and no disrespect to anybody in the room, we're not going to learn from other hospitals. Because this is probably not, if you looked at every industry in the world and said, who is the best when it comes to consistency and quality and efficiency, you would probably not choose hospital management. Again, I love you all. I'm just trying to be objective. You would not choose that as the go-to industry. So they said, let's ask ourselves a simple question. From the point of view of all the things we need to work on, who is the greatest organization in the world, no matter the industry? What they concluded 15 years ago, not surprisingly, it was Toyota. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have done, lean techniques, and you do a 2-hour seminar and all that kind of stuff. Gary Kaplan and his colleagues just went totally all in on understanding how Toyota manages to do what it does in terms of efficiency, quality, reliability. He started organizing. He'd take 10, 12, 15 people from all different roles, doctors, nurses, administrators, accounts receivable clerk, whatever it is, make a cross-functional team, put them on a plane, send them to Tokyo for 2 weeks. And they'd visit the Toyota Museum and learn the history of all the ideas. They'd sit in lectures with all the masters of all the stuff. But they'd end the trip with spending an entire week actually working in a Toyota factory or a factory of one whatsoever. They would be on the shop floor, lifting up the hood or putting in the air conditioning, and they would be pulling the cord if something went wrong and solving a problem. And they really became auto workers for a week, living and breathing and immersing themselves in the Toyota system. Now, And Sandy can appreciate this, the slings and arrows. Well, when he started doing this, he got roasted in the Seattle media. This hospital's barely breaking even. Why is this guy sending all these people to 2-week junkets in Japan? He did team after team, kind of wave after wave. Now, fast forward to today, when all this stuff has worked so well, he's now lionized as this great innovator, and what a brilliant guy to have thought this thing up kind of deal. So don't expect any plaudits or pats on the back as you do the work of innovation. You seldom get them. But he did it team after team, wave after wave for several years. And then they began systematically deploying at Virginia Mason a lot of the ideas, techniques, practices, lessons they learned from Toyota. And the results have been pretty darn remarkable. Wiped off millions of dollars of in-process inventory because they've been so good at the logistic. Cut by 85% the time it takes from when you get your blood drawn and when you get the lab results delivered. Reorganize things so that collectively the staff has to walk 60 miles fewer per day because the layout is so much better and so on. Nurses used to spend, I don't know what it was, 40% of their time at the patient bedside and the rest of their time doing reports and entering data. And they now spend 90% of their time at the patient bedside. So all these, I guess I would call them incremental, tactical, technical innovations. They've just been rolling them out based on all the lessons. But to me, that's not even what's so interesting. What's more interesting is just the sense of imagination and reimagination that these encounters with a completely different organization fueled. So Charlie Kenny, who some of you may know in the room, wrote this book, The Best Practice, a few years ago. And he's got a great story about Virginia Mason in that book about the guy who used to be chief of medicine there, Dr. Robert Mecklenburg, very accomplished surgeon. And Gary Capital wanted him to go on the first trip to Japan. For whatever reason, it couldn't work. But eventually he went, because he was hearing so many good things about it. And because he was a big cheese at the hospital, he went just not as one of the folks, but he had to go, when he went to Japan, with a project in his back pocket, something he was working on that really mattered at Virginia Mason, that he would work together with his Toyota counterpart. So his job was to figure out, could we find a way to build 2 new operating rooms without having to add a new building or a new wing? Again, could we reorganize the work in a particular part of the hospital so we would free up the space to add 2 operating rooms without a lot of capital investment? So he would do his stuff during the day. Then at night, he would work one-on-one with this Japanese sensei, one of the quality masters, working on this problem. So there's this great story where he goes there and he lays out one night some of the blueprints, the drawings of the Virginia Mason campus, and the sensei is looking at the drawings, and he's looking at the drawings. And so the sensei is looking around, and he points his finger at a room, a square on the drawing. He says, Dr. Mecklenburg, this square says this is a waiting room. What happens in a waiting room? I mean, Toyota is just this time. Nothing ever stops. Right? Everything is moving. I don't know if he did it for effect or not, but there's nobody ever waits for anything. What happens in a waiting room? And Mecklenburg laughs and says, well, this is where the patients come. They want to see a doctor or do a lab test, and they wait. And he says, really? And he said, how long do they wait for? And he says, well, to be honest, I'd say the average wait, this was a few years ago, the average wait probably 45 minutes. And the sensei says, really? Is that the only such waiting room on your campus? And Mecklenburg, oh no, look over here, look over here. We're a big place. I'd say there are probably 100 waiting rooms, but even the doctor's office, probably 100 waiting rooms. And he said he could, the guy stands up, you can see the blood kind of draining from his face. And he says to him, just so, my English is good, but just so I understand this, in this campus of yours, you've got 100 rooms where patients come, and by the way, they're sick and worried about the kids, and they wait on average 45 minutes for their appointment. And yeah, that sounds about right. And Mecklenburg said, the guy looked him in the eye and said, aren't you ashamed? And he said the question hit him like a thunderbolt, because it was really, again, for the first time, and he proudly tells the story, so I'm not dissing the guy, but for the first time as an innovator and as a leader, he was looking at the world from the outside in rather than from the inside out. And actually, he really kind of did feel ashamed. And so there's no zeal like the zeal of a convert. So he and his colleagues have come back, and Virginia Mason continues to work on, their long-term aspiration. They'll never get there, of zero waiting time. But again, if you care, you can use texting and internet communication. Things happen and things slip, so don't come to the hospital. Come 20 minutes later and you won't have to wait, kind of deal. And to me, the lesson of that, and again, it's a lot of technology stuff, R&D is not always just research and develop. It's rip off and duplicate. Find idea. You know, you want a really exciting new idea in your field. Find an idea that's already proven, already working in some other field, and ask yourselves, what would it look like if we lifted that idea out of this field and put it in to our field? You don't have to. Innovation is not looking at every problem as if you're the first one to ever consider that problem in the history of humanity and say, how do we solve it? It's looking broadly across all of the creative stuff going off in so many different fields. Like, I know that's got nothing to do with healthcare, but look what they've done there. What's the healthcare version of that? And to me, that's the Vujade mindset. And to me, that kind of allows you to deal with what I think is the great challenge facing innovators today. And that is, and it's certainly facing your colleagues, that is, you can't let what you know limit what you can imagine. I genuinely believe in so many of our organizations, it's not that we don't have enough information, data, knowledge. The really scarce resource is human imagination. And so I spent a lot of this talk sort of discussing how you could make your organizations more creative, more nimble, more compelling, more interesting, if you will. But to me, that all begins when you as innovators figure out how to make yourself and your colleagues always more and more interested in big ideas, interested in small little wrinkles, interested in the enduring mission of your enterprise, and all new ways to bring that mission to life. Talk to any educator, and they'll tell you we learn the most when we encounter people, places, experiences the least like us. That's a whole out of the comfort zone. But it really is true. When you meet someone in a totally unrelated field, doing totally different work than you do, from a completely different part of the world, that's when we grow, that's when we learn, that's when we do. And yet, we all know, it's just the way it is, we spend most of our time with people who are exactly like us. Colleagues from the same organization, peers from the same profession, friends and neighbors from the same city. And so it takes a real act of willpower, a real sense of leadership discipline to say, you know what, yeah, of course I want to be interesting, but the real goal is to stay interested, and interested in people, places, fields that have nothing necessarily to do with what I do on a day-to-day basis. And if you can sort of maintain that mindset, it helps you wrestle with what I think has become the innovation question of our time for all of us as individuals. You look in the mirror and you say to yourself, am I learning as fast as the world is changing? I think that's the job in a nutshell. You want to be relevant. You want to have an impact. You want to rally your colleagues to do new, big, exciting things. You've got to be able to look in the mirror and say honestly to yourselves, I really feel like, as hard as it is and as demanding it is, I'm learning as fast as the world is changing. And if you can get the best ideas from the widest variety of places, that will help you do just that. So thanks for your attention. Thanks for inviting me to the summit. Good luck as you invent the future of your organizations. Thanks very much. Thanks. We're going to do. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks. So we got a couple of mic runners. Oh, good, great. Question right here. Well, we're off. You guys are good. I just have to wait to break the ice. Here we go. If someone wants to raise their hand, we can get the other mic runner to you so we don't have to spend a lot of time.
Hi, Bill.
Hi.
I would like to get your views on intermediation in healthcare. You talked about the strong taking from the weak in the past, the new paradigm being the smart taking
Correct.
from the strong. What I see is as a big problem is, yes, power may have shifted from the doctors to the system,
Yes.
but still the smart cannot easily take away from the strong because it's just a power shifter, but it's still intermediated.
Yeah.
And how is that? And we talk a lot about patient focus, and it works in small ways, maybe some comparative pricing, maybe some minor ways. But at a fundamental level, that intermediation is a big hurdle that doesn't apply to many other industries,
Sure.
not even to the law, where a smart person can actually get up to speed. But this is, I see, as a huge problem.
Sure. It is true, and I wish I had a quick, but clearly what it requires or what it invites is much more systemic thinking. And you use the innovation ecosystem. I think each one of you as organizations is the leader of or part of an ecosystem that involves your doctors and your facilities and your patients and your payers and your regulators and all that kind of stuff. And so this is a systems issue writ large. And it is interesting that so many of the healthcare organizations I've written about, and Virginia Mason is one, and the folks at Henry Ford in Detroit are another, and this is not a one-size-fits-all, but they are organizations that are kind of vertically integrated in a lot of ways, and so they're able to deal with issues of intermediation and so on in ways that are really work for them. So there's no easy answer. What I would say is whether as leaders of organizations, as innovators in organizations, whether you can make it happen or not, you do have to have a clear point of view, almost a manifesto. I mean, lately, I've been encountering organizations that have these incredible manifestos that are not like to rally the troops, but really a clear point of view, not just about where they as an organization are going, but where they would like the whole field to be going. And so when I had that little line, innovation leadership is thought leadership, that's sort of what I mean. You're not just in the business of developing a few new processes or a few new offerings. You really are, if you want to innovate in this space in particular, in the business of leading a conversation among lots of different constituencies about what it's going to take at a systems basis to do the kind of work you want to do, deliver the kind of results you want to deliver. I was having a conversation in the green room about some of the incredible about interventions that Children's Hospital is doing in the community, and they're just working amazingly well. But everybody's trying to figure out, okay, what's the business model, the economic model behind all of them? And those kinds of conversations happen in every field, but I think they happen in healthcare more than any. But I think it's going to be frustrating, and nothing's going to happen as quickly as you want. But part of your job as innovators is not just coming up with new techniques and new processes, but really leading new conversations among regulators, payers, and I know, to sort of say, can we develop a shared vision of where the whole system has to go? And it really does become a matter of thought leadership and a clear point of view. Yes?
Bill, thank you. I'm Peter Weinstock. I'm from Boston Children's Hospital. I run the simulator program for the hospital. I have a question. First of all, thank you for bringing up George Carlin.
Ah, there you go.
May he rest in peace.
The hippy-dippy weatherman,
funniest men of all time. Question is this, psychological safety. So we deal with that all the time in the simulator program. We train people how to use simulation in a psychologically safe way. We train people to feel like they can face errors and mistakes, and the only way to do that, as Amy Edmondson has said time and time again, is to really encourage a culture of psychological safety. Innovation itself requires a culture of psychological safety.
Correct.
I wonder if you could talk about psychological safety on those levels.
Or maybe I'll flip it around. You say psychological safety. Sandy talked about getting people more comfortable with risk. It's just different sides of the same coin, right? So it's interesting. And this is, I mean, again, but this is one of the great dilemmas we have. And I think it's a matter of individuals in psychological safety or have a greater appetite for taking a risk. But it's really also cultural and organizational. So there was this great paper, this great academic paper done a few years ago, which asked the very simple question, why is it, and it's very, why is it that when you look at so many industries and the real game-changing innovations, they tend to come from outsiders, upstarts, new entrants, and why didn't CBS start CNN? Why didn't they, all that kind of, we've been through that a million times, right? So it's easy to say that. But really when you ask, because it was all right there to be done. Why didn't they do it? And what these academics came up with was a language system that said, we think the reason is because of how organizations think about, measure, reward, and maybe most importantly, punish people for risk. And so what they said is we're all familiar with the idea that you've got an idea, you try it, you invest the money, and it doesn't work. And they called that sinking the boat. You build the boat, and you send the boat out, and it sinks. And we all know what happens when you sink the boat. You get bad performance reviews, and you get demoted, or you get fired, or people never quite look at you the same way again. And we all may want to say, oh, we want to embrace change and experimentation, but we know we're really good at quantifying the costs and sort of assessing implications for what happens when you sink the boat. But what they also said is we're really terrible at figuring out why and what happens if you miss the boat. We're right there. We could have been the first hospital ever to do this kind of service or this kind of treatment. We could have been Columbia Records and launched MTV, but we didn't do it. But nobody ever gets flagged for that. Nobody sits back and quantifies. We had the technology, we had the people, we had the idea, but we didn't do it. So that's $1 billion in revenue we never got. That's 500 lives we didn't save. Nobody ever sits down and tries to quantify and hold people accountable in the same way for missing the boat as they do for saving. But in some sense, the history of large organizations in the last 20 years has been a lot more about the history of missing boats than sinking boats. And so somehow, and it is kind of the dog that didn't bark, it's kind of a hard thing to get your arms around, I know, but I think part of making people more comfortable with risk, and again, my co-founder, Alan Weber, I'm trying to get it right, but what he says is innovation happens when the cost of the status quo feels like it's greater than the risk of change. And I think a big part of our jobs as leaders is getting people less comfortable with just doing the same, assuming that's the default mode. If we simply keep doing it the way we're doing it, basically okay things will happen. We may not be the greatest things in sliced bread, but there aren't a lot of risks. No. Maybe the way to feel the least safe is to be the most comfortable with how things are going on right now. And now that is, I think that's really less about numbers and quantifying, we could have had, this much business or we could have saved. But it's about creating a sense of positive dissatisfaction, a sense of restlessness. Just as leaders, at least having conversations in your organizations that understand that as tough as it is to try something and see it not work, it's actually kind of worse to not try something that would have worked if we only had the individual and collective fortitude to do it. So it's kind of a mindset flip about risk. And the wise thing is just get a little more comfortable rocking the boat. Try some experiments, little bets, small things, see how they go, and try to build up over time the organizational capacity to do that. Thanks. All right, I'm getting the high sign over here.
I would like to thank Bill for a brilliant
But I'll be
talk.
great. Thank you. Thanks very much.
That was fantastic. Really, really fantastic.